Welcome you to Coffee with the Community. Standing next to me here is Dr. Jeanette Westfall. She is our Director of Curriculum with Liberty Public Schools. And Dr. Westfall and I think she's a little angry with me because yesterday I told her this was very informal and she feels like this is too formal, but she is going to do a great job taking us through today's program and provide us an update on our district curriculum. I want to thank Channel 18, Katie Dennison, for being here to record this. It will be available both on our website and our district YouTube channel, along with all of our other social media venues coming up here real soon. So I want to welcome everyone. Before I step aside and let Jeanette lead us through this next 30 to 45 minutes or so, just want to remind you that we will be back in here for our final Coffee with the Community for this school year coming up on Thursday, May the 8th. Dr. Jungmann will join us for an end-of-the-year state of the district, and we will be promoting that coming up here in the next few weeks. So with that, I turn it over to Dr. Jeanette Westfall.
Thank you, Dallas. Welcome, everyone. I appreciate you coming today on the rainy break in the day, but I wanted to give you a little history about myself. Mr. Brewer said it might be helpful to know my background, and so I started in education way back in the day in the 1980s, and so as an elementary school teacher in Del Valley, Texas, which is just outside of Austin, and worked there for several years before I took a break to raise my family, and came back into education after my family moved to St. Joseph. And I was a high school English teacher and taught elementary summer school, as a matter of fact, at the same time. And then became an instructional coach, and finally, after earning my doctorate, became a principal at the high school, Benton High School on the south side of St. Joseph. And along the way, I had always had a real passion and love for curriculum. And that was evident in my experiences with the state. I was able to serve on several state councils that were designing and monitoring the state MAP test in its early stages in the transition from the Iowa state. I mean, this is back in the day. And so that work really allowed me to explore all the different facets of curriculum that I suppose are not really ever offered to teachers on a site-based level. However, with that being said, I am able to bring that with me to Liberty and share that with our teachers. And so with my background and with the opportunity that really Mr. Brewer and Dr. Williams have allowed me, they've given a pretty open forum for us to relook at the process of our curriculum and then begin to design it the way that is really best utilized by our teachers. And so with that said, what you have in front of you is kind of a guide for the work that we did and the process that I used to create the system that we are now following. And so when I joined the Liberty School District, what I realized was that we had a variety of different teachers serving on different groups and organized councils or teams that were writing disparate parts of curriculum. And so I realized that we needed a systematic approach to the system. And so in putting that in place, I created, or asked actually, Mr. Brewer and Dr. Williams if we could have councils of teacher leaders that represented their grade levels and or departments. And so we went about asking the principals to offer us their best teachers in respect to curriculum for representatives from each grade level and or building. And we meshed that together into this beautiful team of teachers that has at least 2 representatives per building and at least 2 representatives per grade level. We also added to the elementary council a reading specialist and instructional coaches and then special services. We went through the entire system and put a library media specialist in there because they really do have a very specialized focus, and fine arts. And so we felt like it was a well-rounded group of teachers, and they have really blossomed into some wonderful teacher leaders. In the middle level, we did the same thing, but the organization at middle and high school is a little different. We looked at the content areas. So you have your core content, which is math, science, social studies, and English. So those 4 core content areas are represented by a single representative for all 4 middle schools and 1 for the 2 high schools. And then we also have electives, which are 7. And so we add 1 from every elective area. So that's the council, 1 middle level and 1 high school level. So we started that way, and that took us about, let's see, that was in August that I asked, and September that they started. And we started the very beginning about developing the vision of what would be, what is the pathway that the teachers needed to follow, and how could we make that something that is a one Liberty path. And we recognized that we needed to relook at the framework. And what I say is the framework is, as you know, the state provides us with the expectations or the standards that we're supposed to teach. And obviously we have the federal input for that too, which is at this point Common Core, or what we call the Missouri Learning Standards. And then we take those standards and we align them to instructional units. And we use research-based work with Larry Ainsworth to guide our thinking in that. But ultimately, we use the teacher expertise. So the reason why they're teacher leaders is because they know their craft. And so they know what works best with the children outside of the expectations of the state. So we put those two things together along with their content area guidance, because every content area has a national oversight committee. For example, the National Council of Teachers of Math guide mathematics. And so we use their input, and we have created what we call a scope and sequence. And so that's number 2 on our list, where we already had a lot of instructional components in place, but what we needed was a very strong path to follow. So they created a scope and sequence by unit, and some chose their units to be quarterly. And those organizational structures then allowed us to organize the instructional standards within them. So that took us until November, because really one teacher doesn't get to decide. They have to take it back to their teams and talk to their groups and run it by, and then create a draft and then ask for consensus of the draft. And from there, they brought it back, and then we started looking at how will we check on the students' learning. Because it's one thing that we know how to teach them and what to teach them, but it's another thing to figure out if after we teach them, have they learned it? So, so we worked on something called a common summative assessment. And in curriculum language, oftentimes we refer to that as a benchmark. The district benchmarking system allows us to pinpoint areas of improvement in our curriculum and then drive towards absolutely monitoring that improvement. The improvement decisions are made by our teachers. They are designated through a data analysis process that we have shared with them. And then we focus on that all year, with them checking everything along the way and the district monitoring the areas of greatest improvement. So that was all the way through. Really, we finished that in December, and we published internally in January. And we rolled that out under a new curriculum management system called Build Your Own Curriculum. So I've actually pushed right through number 3 onto number 4. And so the curriculum management system was a system that we purchased last year after reviewing a wide variety of different management systems. And those teachers then uploaded their scope and sequence and common summative assessments onto the system for access by all of our district staff. We rolled that out with a big, parade, and made sure everybody understood how to log on to the system and where to find their tools. And then our curriculum council representatives shared with their buildings very specific ways that because everybody got to individualize in respect to how it was presented. Each, even I would tell you, each grade level has its own personality. So all kindergarten teachers are very similar in respect to what they're passionate about and what they focus on with the children. And all 5th grade teachers have these commonalities. And so we let each village decide how it wanted to organize its work so that it worked for them. And we had some constant and very consistent components that went through, and really it'll go through the K-12 system. So with that said, then they had to go back and share with their team levels or content areas how that was organized and what it looked like. In January, they started working off of the same scope and sequence. So really, they hadn't started the year that way. but they started in January, and understanding that it was a draft run and that we were checking out and making sure we didn't have any glitches, there weren't any problems with our organization, there weren't any misconceptions about what our expectations were. And starting in March, we started our first round of what we call our Common Summative Assessment Reviews. And so that benchmark, that district check on student learning started off this first round. So once we start the same instructional path, then we take that check into how our students are performing and look at it and see if they are performing where we want them to be, do we know why we got those results? And if they are not performing where we want them to be, do we know why we got those results? And we are currently right in the middle of that process as we speak. I have a CSA review this afternoon with middle school 6th, 7th, and 8th graders for social studies. So what we do is we take the assessment that they have and we call it unwrapping. We pick it apart. We deconstruct the exam. We lay it on top of a template of the standard that they claim that they're assessing, and we make sure it's aligned. We see what's missing, what gaps they are, and how our students responded. And then after we look at the student responses, we recognize areas that need some special attention based on the student performance, and we go back and make sure it matches the standard that we have. We have not done that before in Liberty. So this is, I'm sorry, I'm checking with Christopher Handy, the Director of Assessment. We do this kind of in tandem as we work with the teams because the data analysis of the assessment is a huge component of the curriculum. It is really the checks and balances of the system. So when we finish with that, the teachers, we've run 20 CSA reviews at this point, and we monitor them the entire way. And I would tell you that the aha moments that come from our teachers in respect to the connection of what it is the students have been able to capture and what they're missing might have something to do with us. It might have to do with the way we're offering it. It might have to do with the questions that we're asking. It might have to do with the way the standards are aligned vertically. So for example, we teach citing text evidence. So if a student is reading, they have to be able to go back into a text and tell us what they found and why it's important. If they're citing text evidence, it can be applied to a variety of things. But if they don't understand how it applies to a character or to the setting of the story or to the plot, and we only check on how it applies to the character or to the setting, but we forget to ask about the plot, then we realize that we don't know anything about a student's ability to cite text evidence to plot. And so what we did was we deconstructed that test to make sure that we've covered all the components so that when we pass, for example, the 3rd graders onto the 4th graders, that we don't have missing pieces, because those 4th graders will say, we do not get it. Our kids don't understand plot. And what we know now is why. We know why, and we know how to go back in and fix it very specifically. So you cannot do that with all 65 standards, and best practices tells us that we need to focus on our priority standards. In our district, we focus on that through data, which is the greatest opportunity for improvement. The fact of the standard that the student needs to learn is absolutely required for life, or it really is necessary so the student can do the next process. So those are the 3 filters that we use to decide what is the most important standards that we focus on, because the teachers can only do that about 6 to 8 times a year, in addition to everything else they do. Because what we're saying is you have to do that and keep everything else that you do well, because we cannot have a situation where we might do less because we focus on one piece. And so that takes us down to the number 5, which is our professional learning communities. Liberty is a professional learning community district where we focus on how do we know what they've learned and what are we going to do if they haven't. And when we work on that, we recently have a couple of components that we put in place. We use the Leadership and Learning organization to bring us data teams training. And that training allows us to give a structure of reviewing the student work to our teachers. It is very refined work. It is what separates teachers from everyone else, because it is a specialized ability that once it's trained, it impacts your thinking as a professional more than any other process that we follow. And I say that because we learn more from what the students tell us they know than from what we teach every day. So it gives us a protocol to follow with them, and it allows the teachers to focus on the results, not just for a grade, but for actually the student learning outcome. And those are, in many people's minds, the same, but they oftentimes are not reported similarly. And so we really want to focus on the fact that they don't know it. What are we going to do? And I would tell you that the highlight of my work here is, what if we are ready to teach something to the children and they know it already? Do we just teach them with everyone else, or do we enrich them? And the data teams process allows us to identify those kids quickly and understand that they need enrichment and they don't need the same thing again, and perhaps this time slower and louder. So we really are working on how to find a system that is reliable, that's based on what the students tell us. And so it's a brand new system that we're just getting started with, but it's a part of the process that we are currently implementing. And so I'm really pleased with the reception. We just had a group tell us today, so exciting to have this. It really does, it encourages the teachers to really look at their practice again, because we know that what they teach every day, first time they bring their A game. And so what if their A game isn't the best, and how do they know which is the best? And this gives them a tool to follow and check that, and then they collaborate together with intent to find out what is the best instructional strategy to use to teach citing text evidence. So we get to the bottom. The goals for next year, really we're going to continue our alignment work because we focused on very specific courses this year in order to get our processes followed. So we're going to continue that work. In addition to, once we identify those best practices, we're going to start adding those. So it kind of is an organic growth of the curriculum based on the teacher practices. And then we are also putting together, we have instructional coaches which are focused on instruction with our teachers. We have already 6 in place at the secondary level. We are adding the elementary component to that in the 14-15 year. And we are creating a team which we will professionally develop so that they can work on those best practice instructional strategies with our teachers. Assigned to the buildings, they're super excited about it because it gives them a really strong instructional focus. We will be also looking at the application of our technology, because as we continue to move forward with technology with our students, we realize that our teachers are sometimes not necessarily as, I would say, as strong of operators. Our students come sometimes as digital natives. They really have been doing this for a long time. And then we are looking at implementing a district-wide resource management system, which is a tracking device that allows us to track our inventory. We spend a lot of money on textbooks every year. And so what we recognize is that we need a system that helps us understand how much that investment is and holds us accountable to making sure we're keeping track of that. It's the fiscal responsibility of this position, and also making sure that every teacher has exactly what they need to meet the needs of our students. And then finally, we are aligning and looking at adoptions. We're back on a system of adoption for our resources. And so this year we have spent the entire year investigating mathematics, with teacher teams looking at the best practices and resources used in our peer districts that are high performing. Instead of just having vendor sales, we really want to see how it's used in a school district, and we want to make sure that it's the kind of product that we want that can support our path. And so elementary worked on that in the first semester. Secondary is finishing that right now. As a matter of fact, we met yesterday, making their recommendations, and I'm excited to tell you that they are very strongly focused on the digital resources, which are very cost effective, and our teachers are excited to use it, and our students are ready to use them. And we will make a decision and make a recommendation to the board, to our executive leadership team, and then to the school board by the end of this school year for adoption for the next year. Next year's adoption we'll look at, we haven't really decided exactly who to land on. I'm thinking secondary is leaning towards language arts. And then we're going back and forth in elementary about where to focus, because we already have our language arts resources currently in our hands. And so that is the Liberty curriculum in a nutshell.